In this lesson, you should have downloaded the Lesson 5 practice file, and inside of it they've given you a variety of different images that we're going to do some quick photo corrections of. To get started, we're going to work on the red eye start JPEG first. In order to open it up in Photoshop, you could go to File and Open, or if you've got Photoshop open, we can simply drag it and drop it into Photoshop to get started. I'm going to do Command and 0 to zoom in so I can see it nicely. Adjust the brightness of my screen just a little bit there. And let's go ahead and do a Save As to save this up. We're going to call this Red Eye Start and just simply call it Red Eye Working and put your name on it. We're also going to reformat this as a Photoshop document. This way any edits that we do or layers that we add, we can always go back to it. We'll say OK to this. The first most obvious problem with this photograph is that she's got some red eye glaring in her pupils. To get rid of this, there's actually a tool dedicated to red eye removal. If you click and hold on the Spot Healing Brush tool, you can see there's a variety of different tools, and the red eye brush tool is what we want to work with. Now this works a lot like a brush. You can set the pupil size of it. We're going to set this to be 23%, and the darken amount should be how dark you want your pupils to be. And in this case, we'll keep it at 62%. Then from here, all you have to do is to click on the area where the pupil should be, and it automatically detects the red inside of that area and fills it in. Next, let's add a curves adjustment layer to be able to lighten this up. Inside of your Adjustments panel, and if you don't see it, you can always go to your Window drop-down menu to be able to find your adjustments. We're going to click on Curves, and notice that it adds a Curves layer and opens up the Properties panel for the curves. If you can't see all of the properties, you may need to click right between here and drag it down so that we can see everything down here at the bottom. Now by default, we could click and drag this line to lighten or darken it, but I want to undo that. If you click Auto, it will automatically look at all the pixels in here and try to adjust it based on what it thinks is the best curve for your line. Additionally, there are some presets that are made for you. For this one, we can choose the lighter RGB, and it'll adjust it based on the lightest portions of this particular part. Another way that you could adjust this is by telling it exactly where it wants the lightest portion to be. Right now, the lightest portion are all these little dots that are in the background. That's not necessarily what we want to adjust it to. We want the lightest portion to be the portion that's on her face. So in order to readjust it, first of all, we're going to reset it by clicking on the little reset button down here. You can click on the little hand icon. This will give you an eyedropper that lets you click anywhere on the image, and notice that as it does this, it adds a little point to here. So if I was to click, say, on her forehead right here and let that be the lightest point, I can then click and drag and adjust that particular point. So clicking and dragging will let me adjust right where it needs to be. And I'm going to drag up till it looks really good, right about there. Seems fine. From here, in order to save this, if I save it as a Photoshop document, going by File and Save, we can say OK to any warnings that pop up. This will keep all of my curves adjustments. But if I wanted to save this as a flattened file, I need to be able to get rid of my adjustments and flatten it down. We can go up to Layers and down to Flatten Image. And notice now the layers are all combined together into one background layer. The final thing we can do to this is adjust her facial features using the Liquify filter. So once it's flattened and we got the background selected, you can go up to the Filter drop-down menu and choose Liquify. This is going to open a separate editor that gives you the ability to recognize the parts of the face. Notice that facial recognition is selected, and it's recognizing the outer boundaries, and if I hover over the different parts, you can see how it recognizes the different parts of the face that we can start to adjust. Now to dial in these adjustments, go over to the panel over to the side, locate the Face Aware Liquify, and let's do it for the different parts. For instance, we can do this for the eyes. Make sure that the link layer is selected so that both eyes are being adjusted at the same time. And as far as the eye size goes, let's make it 32, and if it's off by a little bit, that's okay. If you need to, you can also dial it in. The height of our eyes is going to be linked together, and let's make both of them 10. When we do this, you can see how it adjusts the eyes, making them larger or smaller or wider based on whatever you have selected. If we go down to the mouth, we can adjust the smile by having go up by 5, and so now she's smiling a little bit more. I would actually bring it up a little bit more maybe for that. And then the lip height or the mouth height can go up to be about 9, so just a little bit more to make the lips a little bit more fuller. Once you've got everything dialed in, we've made some subtle changes. I'm going to do Command and the plus sign to zoom in. You can preview the before and after of your changes by clicking on and off this preview button. So when I do this, you can see before and after how subtle these little shifts are in the eyes and in the mouth. Once you're ready to commit to it, you can say OK, and this will commit to the transformation. Finally, we'll go up to File and we'll save our document one last time, and we can close it out. Going back to our folder, next we're going to work on the egret. What we want to do is to add some focal blur and bring in the focus around the bird itself. Now, in order to make these changes, we're going to go into Photoshop, and this time we're not just going to open the file, we're going to open it up as a smart object. What this is going to do is allow us to open our document, so I'm going to select the Start and say Open. But a smart object saves your original document as a separate file. This means whatever edits and changes that we're doing in Photoshop here are not going to affect the original file. We can always go back to it. Now, as always, before we do any of these edits, let's go to File and let's Save As. And we're going to call this the egret working. Put your name on it. We'll hit Save and OK to that. Some other filters that you can apply to your design are found under the Blur Gallery. Blurring around it gives you the ability to add focal length to this. And in our case, let's do a iris blur. With iris blur, you've got a little circle of ovals that you can click on the middle of and move it around to your focal point. Let's move this inward so that it's focused just on the bird itself, so something about like this. The inside circle, lets you click on the little ring, and you can adjust just how much you want the outer edge of the blur to be. We want this to be about just enough so that we can see everything, so around 5 to 8 seems to be really good. We don't want it to be too much. Now you'll notice it's blurry here but sharp here. The amount of transition in between is adjusted by these little dots in the middle. If you want, you can adjust them all at once by clicking on any one of them, or if you hold down the Option on a Mac or an Alt on the Windows, you can individually adjust the individual parts. So I don't want this to blur on his beak, so I'm going to stop it right there. I don't want this to blur on his back, so I'm going to hold down Option and adjust it there. And let's get his feet and this back here also looking good too. So now he's in focus and everything else starts to blur. Starts to blur all the way back or outside of him. Once we're ready to commit to these changes, at the very top you can say OK, and you can see now it applies that blur to the entire image. Now, because we're working with a smart object, at any time if we need to make changes, we can double click on that filter and it brings it back up to allow us to make these changes. It did not change the original. The smart object copy is what we've got. So in our case, if we wanted to increase the blur just a little bit, we could do that and say OK, and it reapplies it. Let's go up to File and we'll save this as our Photoshop document and close it out. Return back to yonder. One of the fun things you can do in Photoshop is to create a panorama from a variety of different photos. So inside of the Files for Panorama folder, there are 4 different pictures of a skyline that were all taken just by kind of shifting the camera over. You can tell these work because parts of the image are still visible as it's going across. And so as you click from one to the other, you can see how things kind of line up. Now in Photoshop, we can do this easily by creating an automated script. Actually, it's already created for us. So before we open up anything, you can go up to File and down to Automate, And these are a variety of different little mini programs that are used to quickly do some complex tasks within Photoshop. Photo Merge is the one that we want. With Photo Merge selected, you can see there's a variety of different ways we could lay out our pictures that we have. For the most part, I always keep it on auto. We are going to use the files that we are going to work in, and we can do a variety of different kind of transformations for these. Things like removing vignette or geometric distortion, even filling things in with content aware. So with the files selected, we can browse, and let's locate all 4 of our pictures, and we can select all of those and say open. This will load them up. When we say OK, this will take a couple of seconds, but you can watch Photoshop in your Layers panel build out all the different portions of it. You can see everything now has its own layer, and all the layers have their own individual layer mask to mask off the part that it wants to keep. And what's really fun is you can turn those on and off to be able to see the different portions of it. On top, it also merged everything together in one single skyline, and you can see the selected areas are all the different parts that were automatically content aware filled in. If I turn that off, this is what the photo would look like without content aware. Now we're still not done with this. Let's do some further adjustments. Inside of your Layers panel, let's flatten this by going to the Layer Options and then choose Flatten Image. There it is there. Down to one single background layer. From here we can deselect it by going up to Select and deselect the areas. To brighten up the clouds, let's go back to our adjustments and let's add a levels adjustment. Remember, with levels you get this little histogram mountain range that lets you click on your sliders and dial in the highlights, the shadows, and even the midtones. However, if you didn't want to do the sliders, you can select your shadows, midtones, and highlights with these little eyedroppers. So with, in this case, the highlights selected, I can click on the lightest portion of this here, and it will automatically shift everything over to brighten up the image. The other thing we can do is to crop this so that it's nice and straight. I can see that my little skyline is off by just a little bit. Selecting the regular crop tool, let's go up to the top. Make sure it's set to ratio with nothing here, so you may have to click clear to clear everything away. We do want to straighten this, so with this selected, we can click along our skyline and drag, and automatically it will straighten and crop it out. Now by default, when it does this, you can see it's going to lose a little bit of the edges. What we want to do is we want to be able to fill this in with a generative expand. With generative expand, this will give us our entire image, and any areas that are cropped out that are white, it's going to automatically generate some pixels inside of that area. So we're going to commit to our transformation by clicking on the checkbox. We're going to keep the generative expand blank and hit generate and give it a second to think about that. What it's doing is it's looking at all the pixels and the objects and subjects around the edges and trying to find an appropriate image to fill that in with. Once it's finished, in our Properties panel, we've got a couple of different variations we can click and choose from. You can click on any one of these to pick the one that you think is most appropriate. I kind of like this one in the middle. Once this is done, we can save it up and we can flatten our image one more time. So let's go to Layer and Flatten Image, and then finally File, and let's save it. Since this is the first time I've done it, first off I'm going to go back to my Lesson 5 folder. I'm going to call this my Ivy Panorama. We'll keep it as a JPEG and hit Save.